Today's episode will be a little more RPG and RPG adjacent heavy, but it's not gonna be all games in the genre, so let's have a look at another 10 little known DOS games together. World of Aden Thunderscape is a 3D dungeon crawling role-playing based on the fantasy books trilogy of the same name. The game starts in a very interesting time for Aden. Not only it is going through a rapid technological revolution, moving from sword and sorcery towards flintlocks and muskets, thanks to advances in industrial manufacturing and invention of the steam engine, but it's also suffering from the effects of the so-called Darkfall, an event causing demons, or nocturnals as they're commonly called, to enter the world and cause chaos. Even more so, some of the inhabitants of the land turn corrupted after going into a dark deal with the forces of Darkfall in exchange for power or out of fear and inability to resist them. Only the toughest, strongest and bravest of adventurers can muster a courage to enter the dark underground, from within which the evil forces emerge and where they lay in their stronghold. You get that, I mean you, right? You're the one to do it. So you start by creating your party of up to 6 characters, picking from both traditional, like dwarves, elves and human races, and also unique ones to the game's lore. Then you choose the classes and skills and head off onto your adventure. Interestingly enough, all characters can learn magic and develop their weapon skills regardless of the class choices. It may seem confusing at first, but in reality it gives you much more freedom in customizing how you'd like your party to develop over the span of your quest. Both exploration and combat takes place on the same first-person perspective viewscreen, but the combat plays out in turns. It's nicely animated and rather robust, so if you like a lot of choice in your fights in RPGs, World of Aden will definitely not disappoint. One thing worth highlighting is the automap, which is very detailed, holds information on doors and enemies found, and can be zoomed in and out and rotated. It may not sound like a lot, but it's very useful and you'll be using it all the time. First area you start in is sorta introductory and will teach you gameplay mechanics. It holds a shop where you can sell items collected during exploration and will allow you to familiarize yourself with game's inner workings and theme. When it's completed, the real game starts. And it's rather fun, I must add, but only if you're willing to overlook the presentation that's just terrible. The sounds are loud and pretty low quality and interfere with quite good city soundtrack, and graphics, I dare you to tell me with the straight face that you can recognize all the enemies that you encounter. To me, many of them look like brown mush on even more brown backgrounds. At least the 3D engine is pretty decent and doesn't disappoint. All in all, if presentation is not the most important thing for you, then there's a lot to like here, and Thunderscape may be worth your time. Uncharted Waters is a sailing and trading simulation taking place during the Age of Discovery, and it was really popular on the consoles in the East in the early 90s. Not as much on PC, where it remained largely unknown. You play as Leon Franco, a young Portuguese noble who aims to restore his family's former glory by amassing riches, and even more so, to gain favor and eventually heart of Lady Christiana. That said, the plot, while present in the game, is merely a background, as Uncharted Waters is really an open-ended title. You start with a small ship, trustworthy first mate, and a small group of sailors ready to conquer the seas. Your main fare in the game, if you decide to play it as the story suggests, will be traveling between countless known and undiscovered locations, trading goods and investing in neutral ports, expanding your sphere of influence. From time to time, you'll be asked by another merchant or royalty to perform additional tasks, which more often than not are worth completing. Same as in most other thematically similar games to Sid Meier's Pirates, you have to make sure to keep your crew fed and with access to water, and your ship or eventually ships in tip-top condition. Hunting for information in pubs and gambling is also a thing, so there's that too. But you don't have to do that all. You can completely ignore all I said to this point and become a pirate, a swashbuckler, a scourge of the seas. You fight like a dairy farmer. How appropriate, you fight like a cow. Raiding other ships and plundering them for riches, you can privateer, or you can not do that either and focus on treasure hunting. Because why the hell not? The possibilities are near limitless. The game, in most part, is played from the top-down view, kinda like aforementioned Pirates, and it also idolizes the era to build an atmosphere of adventuring rather than showing its darker, grim sides. Uncharted Waters is fantastic, and if you liked Sid Meier's classic, you cannot just ignore this one, and have to give it a go, as it may become your next favorite retro game, even if just for a week or two. Veil of Darkness is a horror isometric action-based role-playing with some adventure elements. The vampire Cain took over control of the valley and the village laying within, cutting it off from the outside world. He effectively became its only ruler. He's torturing the villagers, feeding off of them, and turning local women in his posse of vampiress servants. He's not only the evil hanging over the poor village though, zombies and werewolves also roam the area, making the already miserable lives of the villagers a nightmare. You're a cargo plane pilot whose plane is mysteriously shot down when flying over the valley and crash lands within it. The reason for it is unknown, but also irrelevant. You're in the middle of nowhere and you'll have to find a way to leave. You are rescued by Deirdre, a village girl, who takes you to her father, that in turn proclaims you a foretold savior who will free the valley from the Cairn's grasp. And since the valley is cut off from the outside world, the only way to escape is actually through Cairn himself, by killing him that is. So, you'll spend most of your time exploring the valley, meeting characters, gathering information and finding various objects. Most puzzles are either conversation or inventory based, the environmental puzzling is rather limited. Interestingly enough, not all weapons work as well on all enemies, so finding what's best against which creature and then switching to this during encounters is a must, and also puzzles on their own. Well, at least till you figure out all of them and know the pairings by heart. Until then, it's fun because it keeps the gameplay fresh. The main highlight of Veil of Darkness, however, is the story and atmosphere. First is deep, engaging and will keep you on the edge of your seat throughout the whole game, especially that twists and turns are aplenty and your current ally may end up stabbing you in the back later on. And the other is dark, grim and scary, well fitting to the plot. Other than the few select main quests that need to be completed in a certain order, most of the game is open-ended, and the side quest can be attempted in any order. One thing that not everyone may enjoy, and may even discourage some from playing, is that Veil of Darkness seems to be unsure what it wants to be. It is an adventure role-playing mixture, but it doesn't really mix them evenly, and seems to jump between them, never fully committing to either. Vigilance on Talos V is an always scrolling side-view action platformer, or, dare I say it, Metroidvania-like shareware game. I dared, because I have a man butt here and I'm not afraid of anything. It is also partly taken, I mean like the movie with Liam Neeson, but in space and in game format. Kinda. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Your 5-year-old daughter Colise has been kidnapped by the evil aliens known as Xenos, and you, Killian Jarrah, a space mercenary, do not wait to learn what they want for her release, you gear up, suit up and go straight for the military bases. She's bound to be in one, right? And if I ever played an action platformer with a story, and I have, I can pretty much guarantee that she's in the last one. Anyway, like I said, you plow through 3 military installations to save your daughter and kill Director, Xenos' leader, whose mistake of kidnapping your kin was the second to last that he'd made before getting killed eventually. The last was not shooting himself, as you're gonna give him hell for what he did and it's not gonna be as fast and painless. Vigilance's design is rather standard for the games in the genre, the gameplay loop is pretty fun, and running around exploring rather large levels, picking up new weapons and laying destruction all around is not something that gets old fast. Interestingly enough, not all aliens are made the same, some are peaceful and will often offer advice on where to go next and what to do. Obviously, you don't kill those, cause while you're not gonna spare lives of those that are evil, you will also not harm the innocent. You are, after all, a universal superhero, a warrior of justice, savior of the galaxy, in real life, not in the game only. Anyway, presentation-wise, Vigilance on Talos V is awesome. The music, sounds and even voice acting, which you won't hear here sadly, are excellent and definitely top class for 1996, and even more so for a shareware game. Graphics are also nicely detailed, colorful and way beyond what you'd expect from the game that did not have a standard release method. All of that, however, was not free, and came at the price. This time, a literal price. Vigilance on Talos V sold for close to $40, which was nearly twice as much as most other shareware titles went for. And this alone, I fear, may have been the reason for its obscurity. That was years ago though, so if you get a chance to check it out today, do so, as it's worth it. Warriors of Legend is the last of Synergistic Software's role-playing games made with the World Builder engine, the very same engine that powered likes of Conan the Cimmerian and many other games. The engine that's as unique as it is clunky. It features a top-down view for a world traversal between the distant locations and a close-up side view for when you're in towns and for close-quarter battles. It's also so characteristic that you can easily recognize a game made with it in a second if you ever played one before. Its unique, iconic presentation is so instantly distinguishable from anything else that I feel that anyone ever liking one of the games made with it will love them all. The Coven of Evil Sorceress from Lortai, known only as the Black Circle, has raided the peaceful kingdom of Lemuria. King Osric the Great, an ironic name given the state of his kingdom, who's one of the very few survivors of the Black Circle's raid, pled to all the remaining warriors in the country to take upon themselves to rescue the kingdom. This is where you step in. Starting with a group of 4 pre-made adventurers, you venture off on a quest to save your homeland from clutches of evil. The world of Lemuria is beautiful, vibrant and richly populated, even if overtaken by evil. Towns, dungeons and forests are all around, and there's plenty of NPCs to interact with. It offers quite a few side quests too, so you'll be able to immerse yourself in it even more, and won't have to stick to only following the main plot. Sadly, both character customization and combat are rather simple as compared to other games in the genre, which is not an issue in its own right, but feels like a missed chance to add more depth and perhaps even elevate the game to become something bigger, better and more well-known. It was not to be though, so perhaps it was a factor in its obscurity. Presentation is pretty good, both in sounds and graphics department, but also not something we've not seen in other games already. So while Warriors of Legend may not be game of scope of Ultima 7 or Daggerfall in any of its aspects, it's still fun and engaging title nonetheless, and a treat to all fans of RPGs. Warwizard is a shareware fantasy top-down turn-based role-playing. My god, it's a mouthful. It was designed, developed and after not being able to secure a publisher, also published by the duo of Brad McQuaid and Steve Clover. And if the names sound at all familiar to you, then your memory is much better than mine. But to not leave you hanging if it's as quote-unquote as good as mine is, they were hired by Sony a bit later on to work in their brand new studio on a little game known as EverQuest. Yeah, that MMO legend EverQuest. Warwizard, while looking rather basic, is a full-fledged RPG, featuring a large and interesting continent built out of 6 kingdoms: Aden, Crane, Kara, Essea, Zebesk, and Terwan. Great tactical combat system, and robust and deep underlying economy. Ages ago, the king of Terwan wanted to conquer the whole continent by allying himself with the demons from another dimension. All the opposing good forces joined together and with Sacred Monk's help trained the very first Warwizard. Warrior capable of mastering both weapons and magic. All races then pulled together and proceeded to arm him with highest quality artifact gear. His task was to challenge the king of Terwan, which he did, and in the process of their dueling, both died from fatal wounds. The artifacts were looted and are now scattered around unknown regions of the continent. Eons later, Kingdom of Aden is conquered by the Dark Forces, and various monsters emerge seemingly out of nowhere and terrorize the lands. A young Warwizard apprentice must head off to find all 9 artifacts to defeat this new threat. This is where you jump in, taking control of said hero in the making. While you can use all weapons and cast all spells that you learn, companions that you will eventually acquire all have their classes and class-limited abilities. The game is played in turns and follows all the usual role-playing tropes of finding and talking to characters, exploration, fulfilling quests, arming your Warwizard and companions, selling loot and buying gear, and so on and so on and so on. Combat is also played out in turns, it's very tactical and grid-based and uses action points, which you have a certain number of, and they can be spent on movement, melee and ranged attacks, casting spells and using items. Even more so, each part of the body has their own hit points, so if your head or torso goes down to 0, you die. Other extremities at 0 render you disabled, and same goes for all enemies, big or small. Obviously, each body part can be individually targeted, allowing for a very deep and strategic combat tactics. There's day and night cycle in Warwizard, and you have to make sure that characters eat and sleep to be in tip-top form. What I'm trying to telegraph here is that Warwizard is a much bigger, better and advanced game than it looks judging by the surface, and it's really surprising that it wasn't as popular as it should have been. Probably because it was released as shareware, probably because of its nice but rather simple presentation, or probably because of something else. We will never know. After untimely and unexpected death of the good king Meldiron, Kingdom of Vor Terra has been declining rapidly, both socially, with citizens not grasping fully king's premature demise to a rare disease and worrying what will become of the once peaceful kingdom, and also, more importantly, because of the monsters massively creeping seemingly out of nowhere, causing terror and mayhem. It seems to be the theme of today's video, isn't it? Magical and terrifying monsters coming from an unknown location and spreading panic and destruction. Odd. Anyway, if that wasn't enough, plague and disease seem to decimate the populace left and right too, caused by unknown force, natural or otherwise. Death, panic and destruction is all that fills days of innocents who cannot understand the sudden transformation of once idle lands. But amid all that, therein lies a prophecy, written in the ancient book of Heralds. It speaks of this precise situation, of death, despair and fatelessness of the world. But most importantly, it's a prophecy about one of royal blood who will find mythical rainbow egg, deliver it to sacred altar room in the great castle, and from then onward he will bring the peace and prosperity to Vor Terra once more. He will be the next great ruler. You play as one of the knights of the table. Yup, not round table, just table. And I like to imagine here one of those cheap outside wooden tables covered with a single layer of fading chipping of paint and alcohol stains that you can often find on the terraces of rundown pubs. Vor Terra is very simple top-down fantasy role-playing that will see you traveling the land searching for said rainbow egg, leaving no stone or tombstone unturned, seeking for hints and directions by talking to common folk and fighting monsters. It may not be the most sophisticated, deep or even fun RPG of them all, but it's definitely one of the more obscure ones. So much so that there's no footage for it anywhere, and also why I'm showering you with screenshots here. So if you'd like to try the game that hardly anyone has ever played, that's the one to track down. Wibarm is a simple action role-playing platformer hybrid with much more emphasis on action and several different gameplay modes rather than the very basic RPG elements. You play as a bipedal robot that can transform into a tank or a flying spacecraft, kinda like the one in text that we spoke about in previous video. You run around, or travel around I should say really, as you have multiple forms, so you swoop around several large locations, each containing around 10 buildings that can be explored, and as you go about it, you defeat various kinds of enemies collecting power units, which for the most part work kinda like XP and they raise your fighting power. You have 3 kinds of weapons to choose from, with upgrades available upon exploration of new areas. Every now and then you'll encounter an enemy that is considerably stronger than you and you'll have to leave its area to grind on weaker mobs to gain enough power to be able to face it later on. All levels end with boss fights and these take place on separate top-down areas. These too, if too difficult, can be abandoned and returned to later after powering up. To summarize, Wibarm is a game of threes. Why? Because everything in it seems to be based on the number. There are 3 viewpoints depending on the location within the game that you're in, so side view, top-down and 3D. There are 3 forms you can morph into, tank, spacecraft and robot, and finally 3 weapons. Wibarm may not seem like anything special being as simple as it is, but it's surprisingly fun. Westphaser is a first-person arcade shooter conceptually similar to Operation Wolf and the game that released twice. First in 1989 and then 3 years later again under a new and reworked title of Steve McQueen's Westphaser, which is odd as it had literally nothing to do with any of his movies. Why was it re-released then, you may wonder? Well, originally it dropped with dedicated hardware, a light gun in the form of a Colt revolver that, while cool looking, was required for playing. But since the sales were not satisfactory in the slightest, the game was remade to be usable with other input devices. Up to 6 players can play Westphaser and they're going for the bounties for the most famous western bodies, likes of Jesse James, Billy the Kid or Belle Starr to name a few. Also, incredible names for adult movies actors and actresses. So you're chasing the famous outlaws, but before you'll be able to challenge them, you always have to clear the screen of several waves of generic but humorously depicted western-themed bodies. They're bandits, cowboys and Indians among others. All going after you, the same way you go after them. Your life is represented by the burning candle, so you gotta be quick and accurate not to have it burn out too quick. That said, hitting all of the enemies as they appear, often all at once, is impossible. So it's more of a game of minimizing hits sustained rather than avoiding them altogether. Especially that not everything that moves is there to kill you. For whatever the reason, during the single biggest and deadliest shootout of the West, which any shootout would be if you're involved, I must add, there's like literally dozens of civilian innocents going about their business, their daily life, seemingly not noticing the bullets flying left and right, just following their daily schedules. Odd. But that's the 80s game logic for you. Other than DOS and lowly 8-bit Amstrad CPC, Westphaser also came out on Atari ST and Amiga. And oh my days, if you have a choice or any saying in what version to get the Amiga. Or Atari if the other one is not available. They are both like generation or 2 ahead in presentation when compared to DOS. And I don't have to tell you that it's really disappointing. World Rally Fever Born on the Road is probably the single longest named arcade racing game in existence. Probably. I don't feel like checking and Batman's in the toilet dropping bat nuggets into the bat throne, so he can't lend me his world's greatest detective detecting skills to figure it out. So let's assume that I'm correct. WRF has very basic controls, no realistic physics whatsoever, and the emphasis dial is turned all the way towards fast and frantic arcade racing. You pick one of 8 entirely unique drivers, each with their own skills and vehicles, and each representing a different preset of speed, acceleration, steering, grip and jump height. Cause yeah, you can jump in World Rally Fever, over road hazards or other racers. The tournaments are held in different parts of the world, French countryside, New York freeways and urban Tokyo among others, and each of them feature different surface conditions and obstacles. These can be rocks, trees, houses, spectators and others. All that combined provides for a lot of fun variety while racing. World Rally Fever features a lot of pickups too, and this can be traps and bombs among others. It's fast and furious, like the movies, but better, and keeps you on the edge of your seat all throughout the races, barely giving you time to catch your breath. It's just fantastic. Like Mario Kart, but better? No, different. Yes, different seems more appropriate. The racing is super smooth, easily hitting 60 FPS on faster systems, and the graphics complement the hectic snake-like turns with barrage of beautiful images that you pass by. For the most part, all stages are amazing, though in some oddities prevail, like multiple statues of liberty in New York for instance. It doesn't detract from playing in any way really, but does take you out of experience for a second or so. Sounds and music are really good too, and while tunes are not something to hum for hours on end after playing, they don't feel out of place whatsoever. World Rally Fever excels among other arcade races that drop the realism for fast and fun arcade gameplay, as it scores the hat trick of gaming. It sounds, look and most importantly plays great. Check it out. Today's episode was pretty RPG heavy, hope you don't mind. But if you do, or don't, I won't know until you tell me in the comments below, so go ahead and do so. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.